A widowed vampire king hid to test his lover with his triplets, but the cleaning lady uncovered. The castle sat like a crown upon the jagged cliffs, its black spires piercing the moonlit sky. Mist curled through the valleys below, hiding the treacherous paths that led to the fortress. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of old stone, candle wax, and the faint perfume of forgotten flowers. Shadows seemed to move on their own, curling along walls and vanishing into corners. This was the home of the Vampire King, a place of sorrow, power, and secrets. The king sat alone in the grand hall, his dark cloak folding around him like a shadow made flesh. His face was pale as moonlight, his eyes deep pools of grief. Though centuries had passed since the loss of his beloved queen, the ache of her absence was a weight he carried like iron. His hands rested on the arms of his throne, fingers long and elegant, yet tense. He had secluded himself from the world, trusting no one, not even his own triplets, with the truth of his heart. The triplets were unlike any ordinary children. Born of both mortal blood and the king's immortal essence, they possessed strange gifts. Their hair shimmered with faint silver under the moon, and their eyes, though young, held wisdom beyond their years. They were clever, mischievous, and perceptive, yet still children in their delight for games and laughter. The king watched them from a shadowed balcony as they practiced their skills in the courtyard below, their movements precise, almost supernatural. He had returned to the world of humans, not for himself, but to test the one who had captured his attention, a woman whose courage and kindness had not gone unnoticed. She had been a stranger in his halls, but already she showed qualities he had long thought impossible to find: strength, empathy, and a spirit unbroken by fear. Yet the king could not allow himself to trust easily. The pain of loss had made him careful, almost cruel in his methods. He had devised a series of subtle tests. Each trial was designed to measure her heart, her wisdom, and her ability to endure the strange, often dangerous life of his household. And the triplets, innocent yet cunning, were to be both observers and participants, unwitting messengers of his judgment. Meanwhile, the cleaning lady moved quietly through the castle. Mortal and unassuming, she was small and slight, with hair the color of autumn leaves. No one thought much of her. She was overlooked, dismissed as just another servant, yet she possessed a keen sense of awareness. She noticed the smallest details: the way a candle flickered against the wall, the faint hum of magic lingering in a corner, the whispered sighs of those who had lost their way. As she moved from room to room, sweeping the floors and dusting shelves, she began to sense that the castle held secrets far deeper than anyone dared imagine. The paintings on the walls seemed almost alive, the faces in their frames following her as she worked. The chandeliers swayed slightly even though no wind entered the windows. And most unsettling of all, she felt the weight of eyes upon her, even when no one was visible. That night, the king descended from his balcony to observe the courtyard more closely. The triplets had arranged a small mock battle, their laughter ringing through the air. They brandished wooden swords, their movements graceful, and occasionally their eyes flicked toward the castle walls, as though testing the limits of the unseen rules their father had set. The king's gaze softened as he watched them, but his mind was elsewhere. His thoughts were on the woman who had unknowingly become the center of his careful scrutiny. He imagined her moving through the halls, her hands brushing against the old stone, her eyes reflecting the faint light of torches. Would she notice the small things? Would she see the hidden dangers? And more importantly, would her heart remain steadfast when confronted with the darkness that defined his world? The cleaning lady paused at a corner, noticing a faint glow beneath a door she had never opened before. The light pulsed, as if breathing, and a whisper of words, unintelligible yet urgent, escaped through the cracks. Curiosity overpowered caution, and she gently pushed the door. Inside, the chamber was filled with the scent of old parchment and ink, and in the center rested a diary, its leather cover cracked with age. She knelt to examine it. The pages revealed careful notes, strange symbols, and cryptic instructions. It was clear this was no ordinary diary. It was a guide to something hidden, something meant to test, to protect, and perhaps even to punish. The cleaning lady's heart quickened. She realized that the king was not simply a solitary figure of legend. He was a being with deep strategies, hidden plans, and secrets that touched everyone in his castle. Meanwhile, the triplets paused their game, sensing a presence they could not see. They whispered to each other in voices barely audible. "Do you feel it?" one asked. "Something is watching us," another replied. Yet when they looked around, there was no one, only shadows and the distant flicker of candlelight. The king, sensing their unease, allowed a small smile to touch his lips. He had always found their perception both a delight and a worry. They were clever but still children. Soon, they would understand the true nature of their father's tests, but not tonight. Tonight, they were simply observers, absorbing lessons without realizing it. Outside, the moon rose higher, casting silver light through the tall windows. Its glow touched the cleaning lady as she carefully closed the diary, knowing she had uncovered a piece of a puzzle far larger than herself. Yet, the diary was only part of the story. The true test lay ahead, in the interactions between the king, his triplets, and the woman whose courage he sought to measure. The corridors echoed with the soft steps of unseen creatures, the castle's own heartbeat seeming to thrum in response to the king's emotions. He stood once more upon the balcony, staring into the night. He thought of the queen he had lost, her laughter like wind chimes in spring. Her memory was both a comfort and a torment. And now, centuries later, he was faced with the possibility of opening his heart once more. The cleaning lady, feeling a mix of fear and awe, whispered to herself, "This castle, it holds more than walls and shadows. It holds lives, secrets, and perhaps even hearts." She carefully returned the diary to its hidden place, resolving to watch and learn, though she did not yet understand the full weight of what she had uncovered. In the courtyard below, the triplets laughed and played, unaware of the web that surrounded them. The king watched silently, his dark eyes reflective and unreadable. The woman he was testing had yet to arrive for her next trial, but her presence was already felt in the quiet movements of the castle, in the whispers of the walls, in the pulse of magic that flowed like veins through the ancient stone. And then a sudden sound, a soft creak of a floorboard echoed through the halls. The cleaning lady froze. Somewhere nearby, a shadow flickered, and for the first time she felt the eyes of the king upon her. Her heart pounded, and instinctively she ducked behind a pillar. She had seen too much, yet she could not look away. The king's voice, deep and calm, resonated through the hall, though he was unseen. "Curiosity is a dangerous thing, yet sometimes it leads to truths even I cannot foresee." The cleaning lady held her breath, the diary still clutched in her hands, and wondered what fate had brought her to this moment. The castle seemed to hold its breath with her, every shadow and whisper waiting. Somewhere in the darkness beyond the courtyard, the king's eyes followed her, weighing, judging, and perhaps longing. And then, as the wind howled through the towers, a faint glow appeared in the far corner of the hall, a glow that could not be explained by candle or torch. The diary, the triplets, laughter, the king's silent vigil, all pointed toward a future filled with tests, revelations, and perhaps the stirrings of something more powerful than grief or fear. The night stretched on, long and deep, with the castle holding its secrets like a heartbeat. The cleaning lady stepped back from the chamber, aware she had glimpsed something forbidden, and yet unable to shake the pull of the mysteries before her. And as the moonlight touched the highest tower, the king's shadow seemed to stretch and twist across the stone floors, a silent promise that nothing would remain hidden forever. Somewhere, a trial awaited. Somewhere, hearts would be tested. Somewhere, the truth would emerge from the darkness. And for the cleaning lady, it had already begun. The moon hung low over the castle, casting silver light through the tall, arched windows. Shadows stretched along the corridors, twisting and moving as if alive. The castle was quiet but not still. Every creak of the floorboards, every whisper of the wind seemed to carry secrets. The cleaning lady had retreated to her small quarters for the night, but sleep did not come easily. The diary she had found burned in her thoughts. Each symbol, each carefully written note, seemed to pulse with hidden meaning. Somewhere in the castle, the triplets prepared for the next part of their father's silent tests. They moved through the halls with careful precision, their laughter subdued now, replaced by focused whispers. Each of them had received a small task from the king, though none fully understood the larger purpose. Their father's games were never simple, and though they adored him, they also feared him, a fear mixed with respect and love. In the grand hall, the king watched from the shadows. His dark cloak blended seamlessly with the gloom, and his eyes followed the triplets like a hawk observing its young. He had chosen a new observer for the next trial, the woman whose courage had already drawn his attention. She had proven herself brave in small ways, but tonight her heart would face a more significant challenge. The woman arrived quietly, her movements careful and deliberate. She carried no weapons, only her curiosity and a willingness to see the truth. The castle seemed to acknowledge her presence, the flicker of candles, the swish of shadows, even the distant rustle of the triplets. Cloaks all seemed to respond to her. She had been warned that the king's household was not ordinary, yet nothing could have prepared her for the weight of unseen eyes upon her. The king's plan was subtle. The woman would not face danger directly. Instead, she would navigate a series of small trials designed to test her patience, insight, and empathy. The triplets, eager and mischievous, were tasked with observing her reactions, reporting back in ways only the king could interpret. The first trial began in the library, a vast room filled with towering shelves, ancient tomes, and scrolls that smelled of dust and ink. The triplets had arranged a puzzle of symbols on the floor, each one corresponding to a question the king had hidden in his diary. The woman entered cautiously, her eyes scanning the patterns. "What is this place?" she whispered to herself. Her fingers brushed against a rune etched into the marble floor, and a faint glow responded. She realized that each symbol reacted differently depending on touch and intent. It was not a test of strength, but of understanding. The triplets hid behind a curtain, watching her every move. One whispered, "She is clever, see how she hesitates, then chooses carefully." Another nodded. "Yes, but can she see what is not shown? That is the true question." The cleaning lady, drawn by curiosity, had quietly followed the woman. She remained in the shadows, unseen, her heart pounding. She sensed the magic in the room, the careful orchestration of every step. She understood now that the king's trials were more than games. They were reflections of his own heart, tests of character that could reveal the deepest truths. The woman moved from symbol to symbol, her mind sharp, her intuition guiding her. She paused at one that glowed faintly with a silver light. She closed her eyes and thought of the king, of the sadness she had glimpsed in his eyes, and then touched the symbol with reverence. The glow deepened, and the puzzle shifted, forming a clear path across the floor. The triplets exchanged amazed glances. She did it," one breathed. "She understands," whispered another. The smallest, the youngest, smiled widely. "Father will be pleased." From the shadows, the king allowed a small, almost imperceptible smile to touch his lips. He had watched her silently, seeing her courage, her kindness, and her thoughtfulness. Each choice she made revealed a strength he had not expected, and his heart, long frozen by grief, stirred. But the trials were far from over. The next challenge awaited in the moonlit garden, where silver roses and black thorns grew side by side. The air was heavy with perfume, sweet and slightly bitter. A path of glowing stones wound through the garden, and each stone required a choice. Step on the wrong one and the path would shift, confusing the traveler. The woman stepped carefully, sensing the subtle magic beneath her feet. The triplets followed silently, whispering encouragement to each other. "Do not step too quickly," one advised. "It is not only the path that tests you, it is your mind." The cleaning lady had followed again, hiding among the tall shadows of the rose bushes. She watched as the woman paused, then knelt to examine the petals of a silver rose. The petals seemed to hum softly, and the woman's hand hovered before she touched them gently. A faint silver light rose from the ground, illuminating the path forward. The king's heart stirred with both admiration and fear. He had not expected her insight, her empathy, or her patience to match the subtlety of his own magic. Yet, he could not let himself hope. To hope was to risk being hurt, as he had been so many centuries ago. The triplets' laughter, quiet and playful, rang out unexpectedly as they stepped onto the last glowing stone together. "She has succeeded," they whispered. "She is worthy, at least for now." Even as the king prepared for the final phase of the trial, a sudden movement drew everyone's attention. The cleaning lady, caught by a glimmer of moonlight on the steps, was revealed. Her eyes widened as the king's presence became clear to her, though he remained cloaked in shadow. "Who are you?" The king's voice echoed, smooth and deep, carrying authority without anger. The cleaning lady froze, clutching the diary tightly. I did not mean to intrude, Your Majesty," she stammered. I only wanted to understand." The king's gaze softened slightly. "Understanding is dangerous in these halls," he said quietly. "Yet it may also be the most valuable skill of all. You have seen much, perhaps more than intended." The woman in the garden stepped forward, her eyes meeting the king's shadowed gaze. She felt the weight of centuries in that look, a mixture of sorrow, authority, and longing. "I am not afraid," she said, her voice steady. "I seek only truth and to do what is right." The king's chest tightened. Her courage stirred something he had not felt in centuries. It was not merely admiration or desire. It was hope, fragile and trembling, yet undeniable. The triplets, sensing the tension, fell silent. They had seen many things in their short lives, but the silent conversation between their father and this woman was unlike anything they had encountered. It was powerful, intimate, and filled with unspoken questions. The cleaning lady, sensing the shift, took a careful step back. She realized that she was witnessing the beginning of something extraordinary, a moment that would change the lives of everyone in the castle. She had uncovered secrets, yes, but she also understood that the king's heart was slowly opening, and that the tests were not only for the woman but for him as well. The king's voice broke the stillness again. "You have passed the first trials, though you may not yet understand their meaning. Courage, empathy, and wisdom are not always enough. The next challenge will test your heart and your loyalty." The woman's eyes widened slightly, but she nodded. "I am ready," she said. Her words were calm, but her pulse raced. She felt the weight of unseen forces around her, the silent judgment of the triplets and the hidden gaze of the king himself. The triplets giggled softly, though their eyes were sharp. "She is clever, perhaps cleverer than we imagined," whispered the youngest. The cleaning lady, heart pounding, returned to the shadows. She knew that what she had seen tonight was only the beginning. The trials were far from over, and the king's intentions remained mysterious. But for the first time, she felt a strange hope that perhaps, just perhaps, love and understanding could exist even in a castle built on grief, shadows, and centuries of sorrow. Outside, the wind howled through the towers, carrying the scent of silver roses and black thorns. The castle seemed to pulse with life, every stone and shadow aware of the events unfolding within its walls. The night stretched on, full of magic, tension, and possibilities yet unseen. The king watched silently from the balcony, the weight of centuries pressing on him. He had tested many, loved few, and trusted even fewer. Yet the woman had moved through his trials with grace, courage, and a strength he had long thought impossible to find. For the first time in centuries, He wondered if perhaps the darkness surrounding his heart could be softened, if perhaps he could allow himself to hope. And the cleaning lady, standing in the shadows, whispered to herself, "This is no ordinary test, and no ordinary heart. Something powerful is awakening here. I must see what comes next." The castle held its breath as the night deepened. The woman had passed the first trials, yet the true test of loyalty, courage, and love was only beginning. Shadows waited, hearts stirred, and the unseen forces within the castle prepared for the challenges still to come. Storm clouds gathered over the castle, dark and heavy, as if the sky itself sensed the tension within the ancient walls. Lightning split the horizon, casting brief, sharp light across the black spires, making them look like blades against the night. Thunder rolled, shaking the foundations, while rain began to fall in cold, sharp sheets. Inside, the castle's vast halls seemed to grow darker, the shadows longer, more threatening. The king walked silently through the corridors, his cloak flowing behind him like liquid shadow. The storm mirrored the unrest in his heart. He had watched the woman carefully, seen her navigate the trials with courage and wisdom, and yet a deep fear lingered within him. Centuries of grief had taught him that attachment brought danger, that love could destroy, that trust could betray. And still he could not turn away. The triplets, huddled in a quiet corner of the grand hall, whispered among themselves. "Father is different tonight," said the eldest, watching the king's tense posture. "He's softer almost." The youngest, eyes wide with concern, added, "Do you think he will hurt her or hurt himself?" The middle one shook their head. "I think he is testing more than her. He is testing himself." In the hidden shadows, the cleaning lady moved with quiet steps. She had spent the day observing the woman and the triplets, piecing together the king's intentions from subtle gestures, the arrangement of symbols, and whispered instructions the triplets sometimes repeated. She realized the king was not only testing the woman, but also seeking redemption for his own long-held grief. He had been alone for centuries, carrying the memory of his late queen like a sword across his chest. Perhaps, she thought, he feared that allowing someone new into his heart could shatter all he had built. Meanwhile, the woman, unaware of the cleaning lady's presence, entered the castle's inner sanctum, a vast chamber of mirrors, crystal, and softly glowing runes. The room was alive with subtle magic, and every reflection seemed to hold a fragment of the past. The king had prepared this trial with care. It was a test of perception, empathy, and emotional strength. Every mirror reflected not only her image but also moments from the king's life, a glimpse of his queen's smile, the triplets, early years, shadows of loss, and the burden of centuries. She paused before a mirror that shimmered differently from the others. In its reflection, she saw not herself, but the king, seated upon his throne, sorrow etched deeply into his features. She felt the weight of his grief as if it were her own, and for the first time she understood the depth of the trials she faced. They were not only for her courage, they were for understanding, for compassion, for the capacity to love even amidst shadows. The triplets observed from a hidden balcony above, whispering quietly. "She feels it," said one. "She understands the sorrow, but she is not afraid of it." The youngest nodded eagerly. "That is what father needs, someone who sees his heart, not just his power." The cleaning lady, crouched in a shadowed alcove, felt a strange warmth as she watched the woman move through the chamber. She realized that courage alone was not enough to navigate the castle's tests. Insight, empathy, and the ability to carry the weight of someone else's sorrow were equally important, and the woman was showing all of these qualities. Suddenly, the mirrors began to shift. Reflections moved independently, showing moments of danger, unseen threats, and the king's deepest fears. The woman's heart raced, but she did not falter. She knelt before a mirror reflecting the triplets as infants, small and vulnerable. Her fingers brushed the glass and a soft glow pulsed, illuminating the chamber. "I see them," she whispered. "I see your heart and I will not let them fall." The king, hidden in shadow, felt a pang of something long forgotten, hope. She had not only passed the previous trials, but now she had faced the echoes of his grief without fear. And in that moment, he realized that his walls, built over centuries, might finally be broken. But the castle held secrets beyond even the king's control. A sudden chill swept through the chamber and the mirrors flickered. Shadows stretched unnaturally, and a voice, faint and distant, seemed to whisper, "Trust is dangerous. Love is a weapon. One wrong step and all is lost." The woman's pulse quickened. She felt the weight of unseen forces pressing against her, testing not only her courage but her loyalty and judgment. She straightened, her chin lifted, and met her reflection with quiet determination. "I am not afraid," she said softly. "I will not falter." From the balcony, the triplets exchanged tense glances. "She is braver than we imagine," said one. "But will she survive the final challenge?" The middle one shook their head. "That depends on father's own heart. He must let go of his fear if she is to succeed." Outside the chamber, the cleaning lady stepped closer, unable to resist the pull of the castle's magic. She had already seen too much to turn back now. As she crept along the hall, she noticed a faint trail of silver light leading to the king's private quarters. Curiosity surged within her, but so did caution. She understood that crossing that threshold would bring her closer to secrets not meant for mortal eyes. Inside the chamber, the woman reached the last mirror. It reflected the king alone, seated upon his throne, shadows surrounding him like a living cloak. She stepped closer, her eyes meeting the reflection of his sorrow, his longing, and his fear. Without thinking, she reached out, placing her hand against the glass. A soft warmth spread through the room and the reflection shimmered, then solidified. Suddenly the king appeared, not in shadow but in the chamber itself, silent and commanding. His eyes met hers, and in that instant the weight of centuries pressed down upon them both. She did not recoil. Instead, she met his gaze steadily, her heart steady, her breath calm. "You have come far," the king said, his voice low, smooth, and edged with centuries of pain. "Few have seen so much, yet remained unbroken." The woman bowed her head slightly. "I do not fear what I see," she said. "I only wish to understand and to do what is right." A faint flicker of emotion crossed the king's face, something long dormant, almost forgotten. He had tested her courage, her intelligence, her heart. And now, in this quiet, intimate moment, he realized she had passed the ultimate measure: empathy. She had felt his grief without judgment, understood his sorrow without fear, and faced the shadows of his world without fleeing. The triplets, watching from above, held their breath. They had never seen their father's eyes soften in such a way. The youngest whispered, she has touched him, truly touched him." But the moment was fragile. The castle itself seemed to pulse, as if warning them that peace was temporary. The shadows lengthened, and a low rumble echoed through the halls. Magic, old and unpredictable, responded to the shift in emotions, bending reality around the chamber. The cleaning lady, moving closer, caught sight of the king and the woman together. She felt a mix of awe and fear. She realized that the trials were not over, not for the woman, not for the king, and perhaps not for herself. Every choice, every step, carried weight. The balance between trust and fear, courage and caution, had shifted, and the castle awaited the consequences. Lightning struck the highest tower, and the chamber was briefly bathed in blinding light. Shadows danced along the walls, and when the light faded, the king's expression had hardened slightly. He took a measured step closer to the woman, his hand extended, but his eyes held a warning. "You must understand," he said quietly, "that the path ahead is not safe. Trust is fragile, loyalty is tested, and hearts are easily broken. Do you still choose to walk it?" The woman's eyes did not waver. "I choose it," she said firmly. "I will not turn away, and I will not falter." A tense silence followed. The triplets exchanged glances, understanding that their father's heart was slowly opening, but that danger still lingered. The cleaning lady from the shadows, felt the weight of destiny pressing down. She had witnessed the start of something profound, a connection that could either heal centuries of sorrow or be shattered by it. The king studied the woman carefully, the storm outside echoing the turbulence within him. He saw courage, loyalty, and something unexpected, compassion. Perhaps, he thought, this mortal could help him find redemption, not only for himself but for the lives intertwined with his own, including his triplets. Lightning struck again, closer this time, and the castle shuddered. The mirrors in the chamber flickered, showing brief images of the future, moments of challenge, shadows of enemies unseen, and flashes of the king's heart exposed to love and risk. The woman did not flinch. Instead, she held her ground, her hand still extended toward the king. The triplets watched, awe and hope filling their young hearts. They had played many games, faced many tests, but nothing had prepared them for this. The fragile opening of their father's heart, and the possibility of a bond that could bring light to centuries of darkness. And in the shadows, the cleaning lady whispered, "The trials are far from over, but something powerful has begun, something no one could have predicted." The storm raged outside, the castle alive with magic and tension, as the king, the woman, and the triplets stood in a delicate balance between fear, hope, and the promise of redemption. The storm had passed, leaving the castle washed in silver moonlight. The clouds had drifted away, revealing a sky scattered with stars. The air smelled of rain and ancient stone, a strange mixture of freshness and the weight of centuries. The castle seemed calmer, though every shadow still whispered secrets. Inside, a quiet tension lingered, heavier than the storm had been. Tonight, the heart of the castle would be tested, and perhaps healed. The king stood at the balcony, gazing across the dark forest that surrounded his domain. The moonlight reflected off his pale skin, giving him an ethereal, almost otherworldly presence. His eyes were thoughtful, haunted, but also flickering with something long forgotten: hope. Centuries of grief and solitude had shaped him, yet now, for the first time, he considered the possibility of connection again. The woman stepped lightly into the hall behind him. Her presence was calm, yet commanding. She had passed the previous trials, had faced his sorrow, and had proven herself worthy not only in courage but in heart. Yet, she was aware that trust was fragile here, and the king's sorrow had not been easily lifted. "You have seen everything," the king said quietly, his voice carrying the weight of centuries. "You have navigated the shadows of my household, faced the trials, and yet you remain steady. Why?" The woman met his gaze steadily. "Because courage is not enough to survive here," she said softly. "Understanding is needed, compassion is needed, and to love, sometimes one must choose to see the heart behind the shadow." The king's eyes lingered on her face. Her words, simple but profound, stirred emotions he had buried long ago. He thought of the queen he had lost, of centuries spent in darkness, and of the triplets who depended on him, who had never known his heart fully. Now he realized that perhaps he could trust again, not only in another's courage but in his own ability to love without fear. The triplets, hiding in the shadows, watched carefully. They had learned much from these trials. They had seen their father's pain, their father's caution, and now they saw something new, a flicker of hope. "She is not just brave," whispered the eldest. "She sees him, truly sees him." The youngest nodded, eyes wide. "And father, he is beginning to see her." The cleaning lady lingered in a shadowed corridor. She had seen the trials unfold, had glimpsed the king's vulnerabilities, and now understood that love and trust were slowly weaving themselves through the castle walls. She felt the weight of what she had witnessed, the delicate balance between caution and connection, between grief and hope. The king turned from the balcony, his steps silent and deliberate. He approached the woman, his presence commanding yet cautious. "There is one final matter," he said quietly. "A darkness remains in this castle, tied to my grief and my past. If you truly wish to remain here, you must face it, not only for yourself but for all of us." The woman nodded. "I am ready," she said. Her voice was calm, but her heart beat faster. She understood that this challenge was different. It was not a test of skill or courage, but of trust, loyalty, and the willingness to bear the weight of another's sorrow. The king led her to a hidden chamber, a place untouched by time. Its walls were carved with runes of protection, and faint light shimmered along the floor. In the center lay a crystal orb, glowing softly. The king gestured for her to approach. "This orb contains the echoes of my past," he explained. "The grief I have carried, the love I lost, the mistakes I have made. To touch it is to share my burden and to risk your own heart. Few have dared, and fewer have remained unchanged." The woman stepped forward, placing her hands gently upon the orb. A warmth spread through her, and visions appeared, moments of the king's life. The loss of his queen, centuries of solitude, the birth of the triplets, and countless nights spent in shadowed sorrow. She felt the weight of his grief, the depth of his pain, and yet also the strength of his love for those he held dear. The king watched, his expression unreadable. He had feared that exposing this part of himself would drive her away, that his sorrow would be too heavy for anyone to bear. But she remained steady, her hands upon the orb, her eyes soft with understanding. "I see you," she whispered, her voice trembling slightly. "I see your grief, your love, your strength, and I will not turn away." The king's chest tightened. Centuries of pain, of fear and solitude pressed against his heart, but for the first time he felt a stirring of release, a chance at redemption. The woman's courage had not only passed the trials but had reached into the depths of his soul, offering something he had long thought impossible: hope. The triplets, standing just outside the chamber, whispered among themselves. "She is incredible," said the middle one. "She carries his sorrow and does not falter." The youngest nodded eagerly. "And father, he is beginning to trust her fully." The cleaning lady, watching from a distance, felt a quiet joy. She had been an observer, but now she realized she was witnessing a transformation. A king, long bound by grief and fear, opening his heart to trust, to love, and to hope once more. The king took a careful step forward. "You have faced my trials, seen my sorrow, and yet remain. That is no small thing, but know this: trust is fragile and loyalty is tested in ways unseen. Are you prepared for what may come?" The woman met his gaze, steady and unwavering. "I am," she said. "Whatever comes, I will not turn away." A soft light emanated from the orb, bathing the chamber in silver radiance. The king reached out, his hand brushing hers. The contact was electric, a bridge between centuries of sorrow and a fragile promise of hope. The triplets, watching from above, felt a strange warmth. For the first time the castle seemed lighter, less oppressive. Shadows receded slightly, responding to the shift in the king's heart. "Something is changing," whispered the eldest. "The castle, it feels alive." Outside, the cleaning lady smiled softly. She knew that her role in this story was small, yet important. She had seen, she had observed, and she had understood. And now she could step back, knowing that the bonds being formed within the castle were strong, tested by trials and sorrow, yet capable of great beauty. The king and the woman stepped back from the orb, their hands lingering in a gentle touch. The room seemed to hum with quiet power, a promise of new beginnings. The triplets came forward, their faces bright with wonder and joy. "Father, she is truly remarkable," said the middle one. "She belongs here." The king nodded, his gaze softening. "Yes," he said quietly, "she belongs here, and perhaps so does hope." The woman looked at him, her eyes reflecting the light of the orb, the moon, and something deeper: trust, understanding, and the possibility of love. "Then let us begin again," she said softly. "Together." A gentle smile touched the king's lips. It was the first in centuries, a small curve of light in the shadows of his long life. The triplets cheered softly, laughter ringing through the hall like music, blending with the faint whispers of the castle itself. Even the walls seemed lighter, the shadows less harsh, as if acknowledging the change that had begun. The cleaning lady, feeling a sense of closure, began to retreat to her quarters. Yet she paused at the doorway, turning back for a moment. The king and the woman stood together, hand in hand, their hearts cautiously intertwined. For centuries, the castle had known only grief and shadow, yet now it was filled with the quiet pulse of something new: trust, courage, and the fragile bloom of love. As she stepped into the night, the cleaning lady felt the stirrings of destiny. The trials were over, but the story was only beginning. Outside, the moonlight illuminated the castle towers, the mist swirling at their base, and the first hints of dawn painted the sky with soft gold. And somewhere in the highest spire, the king whispered almost to himself, "Will you stay and guard what we have discovered together?" The woman's eyes met his, filled with quiet determination. "I will," she replied, her voice steady, her heart open. And for the first time in centuries, the king believed it. The triplets gathered around them, laughter and joy filling the once silent halls. The castle, long a place of shadows and sorrow, now seemed alive, breathing with the warmth of trust, love, and hope. And in the quiet corners, the cleaning lady smiled. She had witnessed the transformation, seen the redemption, and understood that sometimes the greatest trials were not of strength or courage, but of heart. The castle, under the full moon and now touched by the promise of dawn, was no longer a place of secrets and sorrow. It had become a place of beginnings, a home where hearts once broken could learn to trust, love, and heal.